A couple of years ago, I made a bold claim in a video where I said that Dan Winters was the modern day equivalent of Irving Penn. Irving Penn, if you don't know, is one of the undisputed legends of photography. So a couple of people, I think, had their noses put slightly out of joint, saying you can't make a comparison between Dan Winters and an undisputed legend. And I say I can, because I think Dan Winters is an awesome photographer. In fact, that's one of his prints over there on the wall. So I'd like to share my thoughts about why I think looking at Dan Winters' work, listening to what he has to say, and taking some of his advice on board is going to be so instrumental in moving my photography forward over the next 12 months. Right, so let's just get started with who is Dan Winters. As is tradition here on TPE, I'm going to take a leaf from Dan's website and just give you a little bit of an overview. It says here he studied photography at Moore Park College in Southern California and then went and did a course in documentary film studies in Munich. I'd love to go and study overseas somewhere. Then came back to California, where he worked as a photojournalist and won several regional awards before moving off to New York City and starting to do some magazine work. And he's become known for his unusual celebrity portraiture, his scientific photography, something we'll get into in a moment, his illustrations, drawings, and photojournalistic stories. He's won over 100 national and international awards. He is the recipient of a World Press Photo Awards. He is also been awarded the prestigious Alfred Eisenstadt Award. And then he was also honored by Kodak as a photo icon in their biographical Legends series. So it's not just me saying, hey, I really like Dan Winters, so yeah, that's it. He is a recognized force in photography. But what is it about his work that I feel makes him a modern equivalent to Irving Penn? So the thing that I see with Penn, and it was evident last year when I went to the San Francisco exhibition of his work, is that it's not just one aspect. So often today, especially with, I think, working photographers, you tend to see them only do one thing, only fashion, only documentary, what have you. Whereas Penn, and I appreciate this is across his entire career, so, if people are still doing their career, they haven't finished yet, he photographed all sorts of things, fashion, still life, some, editorial portraiture work, arty kind of pictures. There's a whole gamut of imagery there. So I get the feeling that especially when you see his work in the flesh, as it were, and you see his career mapped out, you get the impression he's experimented. He's in love with the process of photography. He doesn't feel like he's pigeonholed into one certain thing. And Dan is the same. I was introduced to Dan Winters, I think, through a Flern video where Aaron was saying how to process an image, and I think it was the Tom Hanks photograph that one of the first Tom Hanks pictures that Dan took, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I like this. It appeals to more sort of traditional aspect that is within me as a photographer in terms of like the portraiture. And it was quite precise. I've come over time to realize that I'm happier in the studio when the lighting is all very precise, as opposed to kind of like a higgledy-piggledy, crazy, a little bit more sort of, let's say, experimental approach. And so that resonated with me. Now, at this point, I go, oh, okay, right. So all I'm seeing is Dan's celebrity portraiture. And it's pretty good. I dig it. But then I go and check on his website and look, he's got space stuff. Dan, and he talked about this when I was interviewing him. I was very lucky to have spoken with him. And, we had a chat for about an hour. and he talked a lot about the space aspect of things. He's a big fan of NASA and all that exploration, and that appealed to me as well because I love space, right? But the work is very different. There has a bit of a there's a bit of an overlap of preciseness, but the scientific aspect of the space images, it's quite clinical, it's quite sterile, and I mean that in a good way, because it really suits the subject matter. But it's, of course, it's different to his editorial work, the portraits of people. So it's like, oh, well, there's another string to his bow. And then, of course, you get into his work even more, and you see the photojournalism side of things come out, and you go, oh, that's different again. And then you see the personal works. I think it's one of the personal images or something like that. And I loosely classify them as a sort of personal work because it doesn't feel like they were made for a specific purpose. And that once again, they're different. They all show a different personality that I see, or a facet of Dan's personality as they come through. So what was going on is, I'm looking at Dan's books and what have you, and I'm going, oh, these are really cool, and I have to give you like a heads up. Some of his books now are quite pricey, so if you can get a copy, do so. But there's one here. This in the English version of this, which is called periodicals, is like $270 or something. This is the Italian version, which wasn't, and I forget where I found it, but it's Italian. Of course, it doesn't really matter because the pictures are in English, and it's just so. I loved looking at them, and I was like, oh, this is so inspiring, and it made me feel better about me doing, and I've fallen into this trap before, talking about like, oh, this seems really simple, and then trying it, but it made me feel better because in this case, it did feel a little bit more like me, as opposed to when I talked about Joyce Tennyson recently. I said that the light and what have you doesn't really, it's not really me. That aspect, so the studio work of Dan's feels a little bit more in line with my own personality in a studio. So when I tried to replicate the Tom Hanks image, it worked out better, and I'm still happy with that picture. But the other aspect that I mentioned, about having me feel better about my own photography as a whole, is that I was reminded that you don't have to do one thing specifically. So Irving Penn did a whole bunch of stuff, different disparate things. Dan is doing the same. And so when I look at his editorial, when I look at the documentary work, when I look at the magazine articles, the stuff in National Geographic, they're all different. And it says to me, it's okay to have different facets of yourself as a photographer. That it doesn't matter. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself. And for a long time, I felt that I had to be one thing. And that idea of me as a photographer needed to be the same no matter what I was shooting. So looking at Dan's work, seeing the differences, gave me a lot of confidence to go and check out this sort of stuff. So there's another aspect I think that builds on to the pen part, right? So Penn was very instrumental in not physically teaching other photographers, but helping them to develop. Like, here's some photographs, this, what have you. Not strictly as a teacher, but inspiring people. And Dan does something similar, but it's more with words. There's another book that I do have a copy of, but it's in the other room because it's kind of tiny, so it's not really a visual sort of thing. It's called The Road to Seeing. And once again, I do apologize because it's out of print, so it is quite pricey. But if you can get your hands on it, it's worth checking out, because in there Dan shares his ideas and thoughts about photography. And I really like that. I love it when photographers do this, because you get an idea about their mindset, about where they're coming from, what their processes are, not the technical process, but the thought process of how you make images. And I find that really inspiring, because it's one thing to look at this kind of cool picture of Sandra Bullock and go, oh, well, she's on a platform on the light, the thing here and the light, yada, yada, yada. But it's another thing to go, how did the photographer get to that idea? This was this picture here, where did this come from? Where does this style emerge from? Where's those influences? What are all the things that are mulling together inside a person's head that allows them to take these photographs? And that's what I wish there was more of that out and about in the world with photographers. And I hope that with these looks at, people who I enjoy their photography, we get a little bit deeper into it. It inspires you to also go in and check out these people. Look at them. Even if you're not into documentary photography or celebrity portraits, like I don't think anybody's going to watch this. Is like, well, not, there might be some people who are watching this who do celebrity portraiture, but doesn't matter. Whatever you photograph, look at people. The more that you look at other photographers' work, the recognized greats and stuff like, and see what they have to say, their thoughts, their ideas. It can only make your work better, and it certainly has done for me. I said that I think that Dan Winters is the modern day equivalent of Urban Pen, and that is because he is inspiring me. He's inspiring other people. He's creating diverse work. He's in love with the process of photography, and he's also sharing that knowledge. He's not gatekeeping it. So I hope you really enjoy it. And I mentioned that I have interviewed Dan Winters. If you want to go check it out, link over there. Anyway, thanks ever so much for watching. I will see you again soon, and cheerio.